The Range Rover Sport brings a dynamic, road-orientated, sporting edge to Land Rover's product range, slotting neatly between the family-orientated Discovery and the super-luxury Range Rover. It all but matches the best of its sporting SUV rivals on the highway, while decimating them when tarmac turns to turf. In other words, a very accomplished car indeed. 40 years ago, the iconic Range Rover was seen as a sporty, lifestyle-orientated product. But somewhere, at some time since, something changed. The Rangey became a plutocratic luxury saloon that also happened to have the SUV wherewithal to get you home if your country estate happened to be halfway up a mountain. A car that raised a bemused eyebrow if you attempted to hustle it down a twisting B-road. And a car that opened up a big gap to the more family-orientated Discovery that represented Land Rover ownership's next rung down. Now, it was to fill this space that the Solihull brand introduced the Range Rover Sport back in 2005. Despite the name, it was Discovery rather than Range Rover based, but none the worse for that, with a more tarmac-orientated remit that astonishingly managed to retain all of the Disco's legendary ability. Now, the Green lobby howled in protest, but customers who Land Rover would otherwise have lost to sporty SUVs like BMW's X5 and Porsche's Cayenne flocked into ownership. 4 years on, however, and initially minor issues like the slightly utilitarian interior and the lethargic entry-level 2.7-litre diesel were becoming more significant, but were duly solved by the improved model that we're looking at here. Is it sporty? Well, if it isn't now, it's never going to be. This car's combination of air springs, active anti-roll bars and electronically controlled dampers have always produced the kind of firm on-the-road experience that's justified by this model's extraordinary composure on the kind of back routes that would once have required sick bags if you were pressing on in a large SUV. These days it's even better thanks to tweaks to the chassis and an active damping system that can monitor road and driving conditions in conjunction with the air suspension over 300 times a second. There are also massive Brembo brakes which contribute to being able to take this 2.5-ton monster from rest to 100 and back to rest again in just 15 seconds. That's if you're at the wheel of the amazing 503 brake horsepower 5-litre V8 supercharged sports model with its awesome 625 Newton meters of torque, the only petrol model in the Range Rover Sport lineup, and good for 60 from rest in around 5 seconds if you're quick with the steering wheel paddles that many will want to control the slicker shifting 6-speed automatic gearbox. That kind of performance is nice to have, but in the real world, most buyers will end up behind the wheel of one of the two diesel models. The original Range Rover Sport's entry-level 190 brake horsepower 2.7-litre V6 diesel was correctly ignored by many buyers who rightly saw it as anything but sporty and instead went for the 272 brake horsepower TD V8 diesel. Now, these days the choice isn't quite as clear-cut. The V8 diesel continues, but the entry-level point for the Range is an altogether transformed V6 diesel, this time 3 litres in size, with 242 brake horsepower, offering 29% more power and 36% more torque. Like the Discovery it's based on, the Range Rover Sport features Land Rover's unique integrated body frame twin chassis technology, giving ladder chassis strength for off-roading and a unitary body for luxury saloon style cruising. Now, that being the case, we shouldn't be surprised that this car is as good as it is off-road, but it's still a shock to be able to keep up with a GTI on a twisting country lane and then veer off to be able to conquer the kind of terrain that you couldn't even stand up in. It all comes courtesy of air springs capable of raising or lowering the car by over 10 centimetres, a low-range transfer case, hill descent control, and of course the brilliant terrain response system. You simply twist the rotary knob on the centre console to whichever of the terrain settings best describes the land that you're on, and leave the car to do the rest. There's a general driving program, there's one for slippery conditions dubbed grass, gravel and snow, and then 3 specialist off-road modes, one called mud ruts, one called sand and one called rock crawl. Now the improved model that we're looking at here offers an extra dynamic mode to optimise on-road performance when you're off the rough stuff, and that firms up the suspension, sharpens the steering and enhances body control. Whether you like the look of a Range Rover Sport will have a big impact on whether you'll want to buy one. Like the Range Rover Stormer concept vehicle on which it was based, it's dramatic, purposeful and very in your face, especially now. The latest version features these piercing front LED lights and this mesh front grille sitting above a larger air intake to help cool those powerful engines. More important, however, are the changes to the cabin, lately improved with over 1,500 fresh parts. Once very Discovery-like, it's now more closely aligned with plusher Range Rover motoring. Apart from the way the centre console slopes down here, that gives it a much more cocooned, cockpit-orientated feel. Now, owners will certainly like this and the lovely soft touch plastics and hand-stitched leather that makes this a much more luxurious high-end place to spend your time, especially with the lovely mood lighting that you get at night. The smart touchscreen display that you'll find just above the centre console also helps here, removing some of the buttons that were previously dotted around the dash. The driver also gets a display in the centre of the instrument cluster here, giving an at-a-glance rundown of key information. The great high-set seating that gives such a commanding view out and, like the optional rear video screens, keeps the kids quiet on long journeys, is designed for 4 in comfort and 5 if you must, although entry and exit out of the rear is slightly impeded by the huge bite the rear wheel arches take out of the back door openings. There's a decently sized 958 litre boot though, with a separately opening rear screen, so you can drop in smaller items without having to open the whole tailgate. Flatten the split folding rear seat and you've got a total of 2,013 litres of completely flat load space, and these useful chrome tie-down bars to keep bigger items in place during the kind of spirited cornering that will likely be a part of Range Rover Sport ownership. Combining arguably the world's most prolific off-roading ability with cutting-edge SUV on-road handling isn't a cheap proposition, so you won't be surprised to find that your Range Rover Sport purchase is likely to be priced somewhere in the £45,000 to £65,000 bracket. But it's some comfort to know that comparable versions of obvious sporting SUV rivals like BMW's X5 or Porsche's Cayenne are at about the same price. Whether you go for the 6 or 8 cylinder diesel models or the V8 supercharged petrol variant, equipment isn't in short supply at any level of the Range Rover Sport model lineup. All variants get alloy wheels, dynamic stability control. You also get Bluetooth connectivity, where appropriate, a diesel mis-fuel protection device, a touchscreen hard disk drive satellite navigation system with 4x4 interface and voice control, a Harman Kardon 9-speaker audio system, a iPod and USB connectivity module, and leather seat facings. Now, there's only so much you can do to reduce the running costs of a vehicle that tips the scales at over 2.5 tonnes. That's more even than the Range Rover and about twice that of a normal family hatch. Still, Land Rover has had its attention focused on environmental issues in recent times, and the Range Rover Sport has reaped the benefits in its own relative way. The engines used are undeniably efficient for their size and power outputs, considering they're fitted to a vehicle of the Sport's size and capability. Combined fuel economy for the 3-litre diesel that's probably the pick of the range is around 30 miles to the gallon, and you get 243 grams per kilometre of CO2 as a return. Now, comparing that to the TD V8 diesel, you get 294 grams per kilometre of CO2 and a combined fuel consumption figure of around 25 to the gallon. Now, the returns from the supercharged 5-litre petrol V8 are predictably less thrifty. Expect 19 to the gallon on the combined cycle and 348 grams per kilometre of CO2. Residuals aren't bad, suggesting that after 3 years and around 30,000 miles, you'll get 60% of your original purchase price back. If you're after excitement on the road and ultimate capability off it, the Range Rover Sport is one of the very best places you can start your search. Though now faster, plusher and more efficient, it's still a car that's hard to justify, but very easy to like, which, come to think of it, applies to many of the very best things in life. For you, this may be one of them.